my name is John Rose. I'm with the CCAR Education Committee, and it's our pleasure to have our County Assessor Peter Van Norwick with us today. Before Peter gets started, I just want to talk a little bit about and make a plug for our Education Committee. As we've been over the last year, we've been really brainstorming, trying to come up with ideas as most of us are working from home and we can't have in-person lunch and learns or training sessions. So we're really looking to you, other realtors and CCR members and affiliates to get ideas on topics for education and what you'd like to hear and further panel discussions. So maybe in the chat, or you can send us an email either to myself or to CCAR and just let us know what topics that you'd like to hear on future lunch and learns. So with that, I'll turn it over to Peter, and his topic today is called Pick Property Taxes and Pitfalls. So thank you, Peter, for taking time out of your busy schedule to educate us a little bit here.
All right, well, thank you, John, and welcome to all the realtors. And it's great to be able to address you. And as we go through, I'm just going to talk about our main website, show you different panels of it, and share a few war stories with you that, quite frankly, if people had looked at the PIC before they had bought a property, they would have avoided a lot of issues. So I'm going to start sharing my screen, which has the presentation on it. So the PIC property taxes and pitfalls. So the first place, of course, you want to know is, where do you go to find the Property Information Center? And we know it as the PIC, that's always the word that we utilize for it. And if you go to gis.clark.wa.gov, that is where the PIC resides. One of the duties of the assessor's office that really no one ever thinks about too much is we are responsible for listing all the property and what the characteristics are on that property. So the Property Information Center is where you can go to find that information. And when you go to the PIC, that's it. The Property Information Center is where you go to click to get into our data. Let's see. So I already put in a property. You come to a screen, you put in a property. This happens to be my property. And the first thing that you come to is the account tab. And there is a lot of information on this tab that is a realtor you really need to pay attention to. To start with, up here we have the property information number, which is, this is my property. So I have the whole number blacked out or blued out in this case. And it tells you what the parcel ID is, if it's real or personal property, and whether or not this is an active account or is this a past account. So for example, if you have a 5-acre parcel and then you divide it up into a number of parcels, that parent parcel goes away, but it still remains in our system, and then it would have, a different status. And then of course we have the abbreviated property descriptions. The first thing that I want to talk about that's very vital when you are selling a property over here is this box over here, tax status box. And most of the time you're going to be seeing in there the tax status is regular, but there are a couple ones that you also find on a number of properties that you're selling. And that is if they're a senior or if they're in current use. So the warnings that I have for the sales for the tax status, if you look in there and the tax status is senior disabled exemption, what will show up on the PIC is property taxes for that senior. Your buyer, if they buy it halfway through the year, they are going to owe additional taxes because that reduction in taxes is only applies to the month that the senior has it. What will happen is when they buy that property, let's just say they buy it in June. So they only got the exemption for 6 months. On that second tax bill that is sent out from the treasurer's office, the remainder of the taxes plus the additional taxes that would have been owed if it was not in the senior exemption program will be due. And a lot of times that catches a lot of people off guard because they went in, they said, oh, thought the taxes were $800, but in reality they were $3,200. And so that is always something that you want to be aware of. If you look and you say it's senior and disabled exemption. The other one that catches a lot of problems is when the tax status is here, regular, current use, farm and ag land. And I just want to really point this out. Closing times are delayed if you find something is in farm and ag land. For one, in the process alone, when it's transferring, every one of these has to go through the treasurer's office and my office, and we have 15 days to review that. A lot of times we see people come in and they're doing a 30-day close. If it's in current use, you're not going to get a 30-day close, right? Especially if it gets to the title company in like 20 days after you've signed the agreement. And so we end up with a lot of those where people are calling up. It's like, hey, it's supposed to close tomorrow. And it's like, well, yes, but we only got it 2 days ago, and we have not gone through our processes. The important thing in knowing this is knowing what the ramifications are and what the people are taking over. So when it is in farm and agricultural land, you want to know, is your buyer interested in keeping it in or taking it out? Or your seller, if they're interested in paying those back taxes if someone doesn't want it, or exactly how this is going to operate during the transaction. Because when it comes out of current use, people have to pay oftentimes back taxes, interest, plus penalty. And so, you know, a lot of times that can be significant. So if someone's coming in and talking to you and you see that they're in this farm and ag land or in designated forest land, you want to have that discussion with them about what if a buyer doesn't want to continue, or if you're dealing with a buyer and they're looking at something that's maybe in farm and ag, where you actually have to be commercial farming. Ask them, well, are you interested in continuing commercial farming, or do you want to make sure that those back taxes, interest, and penalty are paid before you take possession and not transfer them over? So anytime you see that farm and ag, need to do a little research and really kind of push out those closing times, because we do get a lot of calls in there with people wanting to do fast close on something that's in current use. And you know, it just makes everyone look bad when people are expecting a 30-day close and it ends up it's going to be a 45 or 60-day close. So I just want to go back to the account tab, and I focus here on the administrative data. And there's a lot of information on our pick, and it comes from, you know, all the different jurisdictions around Clark County, you know, from the cities, the sewer districts, school districts, everyone. So the first thing I want to point out to you is zoning. And zoning is really vital information, especially when you're dealing with acreage property. Anytime that you have acreage property, and this one happens to be residential 18, which is basically 18 dwelling units per acre. But if you have something that's like an R5, which is 5-acre zoning, and you have a 4-acre parcel, that is what is called non-conforming. And it can be legal non-conforming and illegal non-conforming. And it's really important to point out to everyone what an illegal lot is. And that is when you have a non-conforming lot. So in a 5-acre zone, say it's 4 acres, that's non-conforming to zoning. And you make it more non-conforming, that lot then becomes what's known as illegal. And when it becomes illegal, you can't legally sell it and you can't get permits on it. And this is the first horror story I'm going to tell you. Is we did have a situation out in Brush Prairie where someone bought a home on a couple-acre lot that was in a 5-acre zoning. They then came in, tore down the house because they wanted to build a new one. So when they went in to get the building permit for the new property, it turns out that at some point that 2-acre lot had been a 3-acre lot, and the owner had sold an acre off to his neighbor, and that non-conforming lot became more non-conforming, and it was now an illegal lot, and they could not get a building permit in order to build that new house. They had actually tore down their house, and when they went to get a building permit to build a new house, they were told because it's an illegal lot, they could not get a building permit. So you can go to community development and get a legal lot determination. So one thing I always recommend for people, if you're looking at property, you're wanting to build, and it's a non-conforming lot, you know, take the time, have your buyer or your seller, a lot of times if you're going to list it, have your seller go get that legal lot determination, have it in hand. Because anytime it is non-conforming, there is risk involved in that. The next thing is the jurisdiction. Whether or not people are in the city limits or the county. A lot of times people really don't know. They think they live in the city of Vancouver, or they don't know they actually live in the county. And that is right there on the pick, telling you what the jurisdiction is. If my property was in the city of Vancouver, even though I have a Vancouver address, my jurisdiction is actually in Clark County. And so if different people want to do stuff on their land, the city and the county have different requirements for ADUs and different things. So it's important to know kind of what your buyers want to know and what jurisdiction they're in. Also then what the school district is, we run into a number of times people like, well, I have a Camas address. I thought it was Camas schools. Well, no, you actually have a Camas address and you're in the Evergreen schools or you're in the Washougal schools. So it is very important that you go take a look at what school district it's in, and that you do that correctly and you communicate to your buyers. Because I said, we do get a number of calls from people saying, hey, I thought I was in the Camden School District and I'm really in Vancouver. How's that working? Those questions can be, addressed right at the beginning. Next thing, we have who the sewer and water district providers are, and we have maps in our system of everywhere the sewer lines run. I'm not going to at this point go too deep into that, but just let you know that the information is there and that we do have maps that do show where the sewer lines are. Oops. All right, so the other one is the account tab is for assessments. And the assessor's office, this is what we're most known for, is putting value on property. And so if you remember back at the account tab, this is over on the far right side. And the first thing I want to point out that you'll notice that 2021 taxes are based on the 2020 assessment. So this is the value up here that we have for the 2021 taxes. It's based on the 2020 assessment. 2020 assessments are as of January 1st, 2020. That confuses a lot of people. And 2020 assessments are based upon 2019 sales. So most people really only start caring about what the assessment is when the taxes show up, but it's important to know that the taxes you're paying for 21 is based upon the assessment in 2020. which is based upon the sales in 2019. So a lot of times people will call us up and go, hey, I'm selling the property. I would like the assessment to be higher. And we're like, really that assessment, you should never be looking at our assessment for market value for a couple of reasons. Number one, it's based upon sales that could be over a year old. And the other thing is our assessed values are mass appraisal value. Do not use them. And I have to repeat that. Do not use them to determine market value. And I think it's important to just kind of explain to everyone what that mass appraisal is. And, we will get to that further on in the presentation. The next tab that we have is the building tab. And we do have, information on there. I really have to point out to you number of bedrooms. That is vital for people to pay attention to. Because there are septic issues. If you find a property that's on a septic and it has, say, 3 bedrooms, and you want to build an ADU and put a bedroom in there, your septic system may not support it. And because of that, you may not be able to get an ADU built on a property. And like I said, this has become a much bigger issue. One thing that we try to do in the assessor's office is we try to look at what the intent was of the builder of the property to begin with. If they say it's 3 bedrooms and a den, we'll usually put it in as 3 bedrooms. And if you list it as a 5-bedroom house, then we'll usually go in and put it as 5 bedrooms. Unfortunately, the health department has been looking at our information and doing it as to whether or not they'll give approval. And, we're going to be in further discussions with them. But just know that if people want to do additional building and they have it down as a 3-bedroom and they want to add additional stuff in, there may be hoops that they need to jump through. They may not be able to extend their septic system, or it may be more costly than they thought. We're dealing with one right now where the people bought a house. They had talked to their realtor, wanted to do some improvements on the house, and their building permits denied. And last I talked to them, they were saying they're thinking about going back and suing the realtors because the realtors did not tell them that they would have issues down the road. And so it's always good to just know that information up front and discuss with them. Because one of the issues is when we do bedroom counts, a lot of times the ones that we're dealing with, I was just giving you that example of where they're potentially going after the realtors in a suit. There was 4 bedrooms on a ranch, and it was a ranch with a daylight basement. Well, the daylight basement was finished, and it was finished with 2 additional bedrooms. Well, the 2 additional bedrooms, when the person did it, they didn't go and get it permitted. And so then that's when they went to build their ADU. The septic issues really came up. So this is a real hot issues with ADU. And so just know that the bedroom count is in there. If the people are saying, hey, I want to build an ADU, you may have to do more research. You may have to find out, hey, what was that septic approved for? How many bedrooms was it approved for? And do additional research so your buyers know exactly what they're getting. So the next one's the environmental tab. And we do put in there whether or not property has wetlands in it or not. And then you can see if it has a well. We put that information in, and if it has septic. So like I say, if it has septic and people are telling you, hey, can I build an ADU here? And you see like, well, it's 4 bedroom. Well, first we need to put in a call to the health department and find out how many bedrooms this septic system was designed for and what it would take to go on and do further improvements on the property. So So that information is out there and available. This is not a public page, but I did want to show it because one thing is that we get lots of calls from people, and that is like, well, I have wetlands on my property, so are you taxing that? And this is basically our land detail page that we have behind it. And I just pulled the property here, and you can see it has value for a home site, flat, rolling, steep, and gravel. And we do go through, and every assessment is based upon it. So if you have wetlands on it, that would be considered low, and it has a different value placed upon it than if it's flat ground that's more usable. So all those, we go through all the different sales and analyze them of acreage and their different topography and come up with figures, and it is applied to it. So it's always a good thing to let people know if they do have a property that have wetlands on it, is yes, there is an adjustment already in the assessment for that. The other thing that I want to talk about in mass appraisal is everything in mass appraisal starts with value of land as vacant. So when we go out and we value property, we have to value everything in equity. So if a lot next to you is selling for 100,000, but it doesn't have a house on it, but your property does have a house on it, then I also need to place that same value on your land, because things have to be in equity. And typically what we do in like subdivisions is we go in and we just place the same value on all property. And if you have a green belt, we make adjustments for that. Or if there's noise issues, we make adjustments for that. So I just wanted to talk about a property that I found, and this property is actually over by Legacy Salmon Creek. And I just want to point out a situation, and that is, you notice we have a land value $459,580, building value is 0, and so we have 459,000 on it. The next year we had 472,300 on the land, all of a sudden 9,900 on the building, 482 thousand on the total property. What is happening here is you're looking at what's called a highest and best use. You can look at that home and see, obviously that's an old home. It's been sitting there for a long time. But in 2019, the appraiser put 0 on it. And so what that means is when our appraiser took a look at that property, they were basically like, well, I go out and look, and maybe that mobile home they're looking in this, it would only sell for 450 as not developable land. But as developable land, we're going, would sell for 459,000. Therefore, that building is contributing 0 to it. And since we had to do it in equity, we put 0 value on property. The next year they went out and looked at it, and they look at the residential sales, and they're like, well, a home like that on an acre just selling as a home, it'd sell for 482,000, but the land itself would only sell for 472. So now we're seeing that the appraiser made that decision that contributes. The issue is, and John can also address this, I'm sure, at some point later when you talk to him, is when appraisers go out and take a look at it, and it's like, wow, there's a 0 value on that structure, or the structure value is really low, you can be facing a highest and best use issue. And if you have a highest and best use issue, it's hard to say. A lot of times it's hard to get, you can't get conforming residential loans on them because we're basically saying for this property, the highest and best use of that property would be to go and change that land into developable land. And under assessment, the state laws of the state of Washington, we are always required to value a property at its highest and best use. So it doesn't matter if it's a single family home on 5 acres and that's selling for 400,000, but 500, but the 5 acres for development, and this is development land and sell for 500,000. We have to put the highest value on it. It's not based upon what they're currently using the land is, but as how the land is vacant. I see there's some things in chat. Let's see. I'm just going to pull up. I'm going to see if there are some questions in chat I can address at this point. Let's see. Okay, so someone that was asking about the compensating tax, and the rate of interest is 1% per month. So that is very high percent that is paid. And the question is why are there penalties? The easy answer to that is because it's in state law, and the penalties, the reality is it is all penalty. The taxes that were billed were based upon the use, and when the state puts stuff into current use, it's to preserve land. And so they're trying to preserve either farmland or ag land. And so when you come out, the state law says that they need to pay those back taxes, because when the person didn't pay the taxes on the land that's in current use, all the neighboring parcels picked up and paid those taxes, which I'll get into a little bit more later. So that's why there's the interest and penalty, and the penalty is 20%. There's some ways to avoid the penalty, but I don't have enough time to go into that information now. Okay, someone just wants it. Let's see. Someone's saying the date on the recording sales date, and sometimes on the actual deed. Yeah, there is different times, because sometimes people actually sign deeds over and then do recording later. So we try to do it as much as possible when it is, but part of that is when the title company puts it in. Okay, so if a home has 4 bedrooms and 2 are not permitted, you can still list as 4 if the bedroom meets code. That's not really a question that I can answer. We just, one thing with the assessor's office is we list what's there. We don't look at whether or not it's legal or not. There are times if we go out and we see people have built something and it's not conforming, or they should have got a permit, we will let code enforcement know, especially if people a lot of times build ag buildings and then convert them over to ADUs and people are in them, and those they have not actually gone through the permit process. That's a health safety issue, and so that's an issue that we have code enforcement. All right, I'll go back to my presentation. So I just want to talk about the basics of mass appraisal. So in this scenario here, we have 5 homes, and I always use the example I'm talking about. Let's just say these are 5 Ajo homes, all on the same street. They're a few years old. They're identical, but they sell. You know, every house really has a price range, and they sold from 200,000 to 220,000. So one sold at 200, one at 205, one at 210, one at 215, one at 220. When I go and do mass appraisal, I have to do everything in equity, and I have to put a single value on all the properties. And so what my team does is we will go through and analyze the sales, And then we will come up, and the 5 sales, we put 210 on all of them after analyzing the sales. And there's a couple other identical homes that also didn't sell. And so we are actually putting that assessed value on their property also. So I always try to just explain it to people as we're not actually appraising the property itself. We're really valuing the characteristics of the property and applying them in mass. So you can imagine the calls that we get, because we'll have the person that bought it for 200,000 and they get their assessment and it's at 210. They call us up. They're like, you know, you're crazy. You don't know what you're doing. You greatly have my home over assessed. And, you know, and we say, well, you know, actually, you know, that's part of the process. We can't do what's called sale chasing. We can't, it's actually illegal in the state of Washington if a home sold at 200,000 to go and then just place the assessment value on that. So we do have to do the analysis and do it. You know, the person that sold at 210, they think we're right on. Of course, the person that bought at 220 and it comes back at 210, you know, they think the assessments are run a little low, but we are always aiming for 100% of market value. And remember, that's based upon sales from the prior year. So that's kind of the basis of mass appraisal, is realizing if the homes are identical and the characteristics are identical, we have to put the exact same assessed value on all of them. I also, too, there's something very important to understand about property taxes, and that's how they work. The most calls we get into our office are from people that don't understand how assessed value ties to property taxes. And a lot of times they tell us, well, our realtor told us this, or this, you know, we were told this when we were buying the property. But in the state of Washington, it's a pretty easy formula. You take the tax district budget, and the tax district can be the county, it could be a city, it could be, you know, the library district, fire district. And they send us in a budget, and we take that and we divide it by the total assessed value, and we come up with a tax rate. And then that is applied back onto each of the homes in the taxing district based upon their assessed value. So let's just say this tax district, they sent in a budget. They said, you need to the assessor's office, you need to collect $10,000. And the whole value of their taxing district was the 7 homes that I showed you prior, right? So you have the 7 homes times the 210,000, which, you know, if you remember that, their assessed value we placed on all of them was 210,000, equals 1,470,000 as the total assessed value. So we take that 1.47 million divided by the 10,000, and we come up with a tax rate of 0.006802721. Now, typically when we're doing assessments, you see a mill rate, which is a rate per thousand, but just to skip that step, I decided to skip that step in this example. So you have the house at 210,000 times the tax rate 0.0068, and that home will pay property taxes of $1,420.57. And that will fulfill the requirements of the taxing district for their budget of $10,000. So let's just say the next year, the home values increase 10%. So now the assessed values are up to 231,000, but the taxing district still has the same budget, 10,000. So if you take the 7 homes times the 231,000, you now end up with a total assessed value of 1.617 million and a tax rate 0.006184292. Take that tax rate, divide it back out by the assessed value of all the homes, and you see the property taxes are $1,428.57. And the reason we like to show people is to understand is not the increasing of the assessed values that increases the property taxes. What happens is when the property taxes increase, as you can see, that tax rate decreases. And it's really important in assessment that we try to be as close to 100% of market value as possible. So just here, assessed values go up, say the budget's fixed, tax rates go down. The next thing I want to do is show you a couple of examples of real life examples in the county to show you what I'm talking about. So this is actually what I get from the county council every year. And you'll notice is when it's sent to the assessor's office, it says I'm to collect $63,376,133.39 for the general fund levy. That's what we're collecting. It doesn't matter if assessed values increase or decrease. That is the amount that I'm going to collect. The number one thing I have people call us in the office is the only reason you're raising our assessed values is so that you can bring in more tax revenue. And it's like, nope, that's not the case, because the budget and the amount of dollars they send to us is based upon other calculations that has nothing to do with the assessed values going up or not. This also is a Washougal proposition for a levy. And I wanted you to just notice that in there they have a tax rate, but you notice it's estimated. The key driver, what people are really voting on, are these levy amounts, $7,392,656. That is what's going to be sent on to me in the levy certification, and which will appear in their budget. So regardless of what happens with assessed values, that's the amount that the voters have approved. So that's the amount of money that I'm going to collect. And the tax rate, you know, if they estimated wrong, for example, let's say assessed values went up more than they estimated, what would happen is the tax rate would be lower. Okay, so looks like Rich Gonzalez, the tax bid district budget available to the public, is it an annual budget? And the answer to that is yes. Each tax district every year holds budget hearings, typically in November. School districts is a little bit earlier, but they are in that tax budget is the exact dollar amount that they are going to be sending to the assessor's office for collection of assessment. So let's just say, for example, if in the general fund levy, the county had put in their budget to collect $65 million, and they sent it down to me, and they sent me down where it said $63 million, I'd have to go back to the county and say, look, it has to match whatever was in your budget hearing. You can't ask for less. On the other side, one of the main duties of the assessor is to protect the taxpayers. And we keep track in my office, which is known as the highest lawful limit. And that is the most money that a tax district can collect from its citizens. So for example, in this Washougal School District one over here, the voters approved that levy limit of $7,392,656. So let's just say, for example, I came into, excuse me, my office, and all of a sudden their certification said $7,400,000. My office would go in and say, no, your levy limit was $7,392,656. That is the amount that we're going to collect. You need to go back and redo your budget. All right, the next thing I want to talk about is taxes and the property taxes. And this information actually comes from, excuse me, actually comes from the treasurer's office. And as you can see, you can go back on a property and see how much was billed the prior years. They have a tab to pay online. They have the tax distribution, and they have the tax statements. And you notice here the mill rate is the tax per thousand. So a lot of times, one of the other issues that has come up is, let's just say you have a home that was on a senior exemption and you want to know what the tax really should have been. You can go on a map, click on its neighbor's house, and if it's, you know, regular tax, you can find the mill rate there and apply it to the assessed value. You know exactly what the taxes are. Or if you're like, say it's new construction, a good rule of thumb is property taxes tend to run about 1% of the property value. So if, you know, you're selling a house for, let's say, 500,000, you know, you're always usually pretty safe if you assume that the taxes, estimating the taxes to be at about 5,000 or 1%. But if you do want to know the exact mill rate, there are other documents that we do have. Like I says, usually the easiest way is to go find a property that's taxed close to it on a map, click on it, go to the taxes page and find out what the mill rate is for that taxing district. All right, why did taxes increase? This is the biggest call we get into our office, and we provide what's called the tax distribution. And we go and we show by every taxing district that a property has what the tax rate was, and in this case, 2019 and 2020, and what the amount of the taxes were, and then over here, what the difference is. And this is real key to understand is if you look through here and you can see that these person's taxes, which were, I think they were mine, it went up about over $100, a couple $100 from year to year. But you can go and see exactly what the taxing districts were that led to the increase. So in mine, you can see the Vancouver Technology Levy. They passed a new levy. That was an increase of $43. And State Schools Part 2 was responsible for 109 of the tax increases. And so that is really, if you really are wondering what is happening with property taxes and why they're going up, that's the best place to go to go see. Karen put in message, how do you know that, do you have lenders that are known to pay taxes on behalf of the homeowners late? Payment of taxes is a treasurer's issue, and typically they don't. Sometimes we do run into issues where in current use, people are taken out. And if it's on a mortgage, believe it or not, sometimes people ignore letters that come from the assessor's office. And if we sit there and we say, okay, you're in current use, you were audited, you didn't respond, and so you're now taken out and you have to pay $30,000 in back taxes. Well, you have a lender on that property, they're going to pay the taxes. So then a lot of times people then get their mortgage statement the next year and it's like, ooh, now I owe like $2,000 more per month because they have to catch up to pay for those property taxes. Or a lot of times then the lender says, you know, you need to go and you need to pay this amount immediately to get your property taxes up to date. So lenders do basically come in and typically pay the taxes that are owed on properties.
Hey, Peter, real quick, going back, there's a question in the Q&A. Richard had a question when you were talking about that tax statement sent by Washougal. He says, is the tax district budget available to the public? And is that an annual budget?
Yes, it is available to the public. You can get to us, you can ask us for copies of each tax district certification, and each taxing district budget hearing has to be a public meeting. And the other thing to remember is that you do elect everyone that can apply property taxes on your property in the annual budget are elected by the voters in that tax district. So, you know, your fire district, every fire commissioner run for office. You know, a lot of times people never pay attention to who's running for fire commissioner, but that person is really in there determining how much they're going to charge in property taxes, when they're going to put out information or put out on the ballot to raise their levy limits. All those type of things are based upon people that, you know, you did vote for. Also, the other thing to point out here on the property taxes, let's see, I'm trying to, so you'll notice down here on the property tax statement, you'll see where it says voted levy and non-voted levy. And this appears on every property tax bill. And so you'll notice in this tax statement of, looks like the $3,737 in property taxes, $2,306 of that came from your elected officials of the different tax districts, but $1,237 of that came from your neighbors voting directly to impose those taxes. So a lot of times people call us up and they're like, hey, property taxes keep going up. How come the government keeps raising it up? And, you know, a big portion of those taxes are voter approved. And, you know, whenever I talk about these people and they call up and they're complaining about the taxes, I say, well, one thing you could do to get involved is every time one of these tax measures go on the ballot, there is an opportunity to write a no statement. And, you know, a lot of times you'll see the auditor's office will send out press releases. Hey, Washougal has something on the ballot and no one's written a no statement. Can someone please write the no statement? And a lot of times no one ever steps up. And so a lot of times when these taxes are on the ballot, all you get is the pro statement from the district, but a lot of times never have the no statement. So if you're interested in holding property taxes low and you want to get involved, that is a way that you know, you can get involved and, you know, help your community. In my office, we help both sides equally. I mean, if people want to go and vote to raise their property taxes on them, you know, I don't live in that tax district. It's not my issue. So we're, you know, agnostic to what the voters are doing. And so we help both sides equally through that process, just to make sure all the facts are correct. A lot of the school districts, when they're going out to put their ballot measures on, actually will send us the information to look over it. Because, you know, there have been some challenges with that in the past. And I know none of the districts like to get sideways. Whoops. None of the tax districts like to get sideways with us when we say the information is not accurate. So there is that opportunity to get involved if you're interested.
So Peter, talking about the taxes, and Laverne had a question about, you see there, to help calculate the property taxes after taking the property out of senior exemption, could she then multiply the mill rate by the sales price, and then would that, or the assessed value, and would that give them an accurate tax rate?
Yeah, she would want to take that mill rate and multiply it times the market value of the property. Let's see, let me go back to that slide really fast. So as you can see on this assessment data, we have the total property, right? And then the taxable value. On a senior, this taxable value will be lower. And so in that situation, you would take the mill rate, not the mill rate that would show up on here, but like one of the neighboring properties, what it is for that neighborhood, times that property assessed value for the prior year, and that's what what the total would be in taxes. Because on a senior exemption, the taxable value shows up here, which would be that lower amount that they're actually paying taxes on it, where the buyer would be paying taxes on the actual market value of the property. Does that answer the question? Let's see.
I think we get that question quite a bit with new construction, is oftentimes, lenders are wanting to know an estimated tax rate for a property that's newly built or to be built. So that would allow those realtors to go out there and understand what the possible tax rate's going to be.
Yeah, and like I say, on new construction, a lot of times, okay, what it is selling for times the current, the tax rate that was on the land before, gives you a pretty good idea. Like I say, it usually runs about a 1%, is what property taxes typically run at this point. The other thing that's out on our website is the recorded documents. So you can go through and find all the documents that were recorded on it. The other day, someone was talking about easements on Facebook, and I did want to make sure I address it. This is where you go in and find out whether or not an easement has been recorded on a property. And typically easements are recorded on the dominant and the servant parcels both. And so, you're going to see that on both of them, but you can go and find out all the different things that have been filed. If someone has a deed of trust and those documents, everything that's done in there does record it on the recording page under the auditor's document. So that is an auditor's function, but it's just good to know that it's out there. And so if you ever do need to go and record an easement, that would be done through the auditor's office and do that. This is a good point for me to really say one thing, and that is, a lot of times people will go and decide to subdivide property by going to my office to land records. They'll come in and say, hey, I have 5 acres. Can you please divide it into 5 1-acre parcels? That is not subdividing of property. My office does not subdivide property, and that can be very confusing for people. I have to, under state law, if someone comes in and says, I have a 5-acre parcel, I want it broken into 5 different tax parcels, I have to then record, or I have to then create 5 different tax parcels. That doesn't make them legal lots. That doesn't even make them lots. That just makes it 5 different parcels. And we do have a lot of times where people don't want to go through the process and, do it that way. And that's typically a lot of times how illegal lots are formed, is people just decide that they just want to go record a sales document that is taking the 5 west acres and just record it, and we need to go in and then carve that out, but it may not necessarily be legal lots that you're forming, and people don't find that out until they go into the building department, and the building department goes, well, those aren't 5 legal lots. And so the appropriate way to subdivide property is to go through your city's community development or the county community development. My office, we do create parcels. Those are for tax purposes only, and that is not a proper subdivision of property. And that's why a lot of times when people go in, they'll have a situation where the community development will say, hey, you need to combine these 3 parcels before we'll give you a permit, just because they know it causes problems later when people say, well, I have this tax parcel, I can just sell it off, when it may not be actually a legal lot and cause issues down the road. The other thing is building permits. Those also appear on our website. I'm sure John, as an appraiser, can tell you, people go and make changes to their property and don't get it permitted. We're going to find out. And when you go to sell, it can cause issues because if there's another bedroom on there and there's no permit, that does typically become a issue with the loan. And so you can go and see if you see something was added on, go and check and see whether or not the permit was there. Sometimes cities don't send us all the permits, so just because it's not here doesn't necessarily mean a permit wasn't done. But if it doesn't appear on here, your next call would be to the jurisdiction that issued the permit to find out if they did have a permit. It's like I said, unpermitted stuff that gets built and then sold does cause us a lot of issues at a later time, and you can look that stuff up ahead of time. So at this point, I will open it up to questions. I know that was a quick overview of what's there. I'm always available by email or by phone. My office number is there directly. We're always there. We'll do the best we can to help on transactions. But one thing we really can't do is when there's transactions that, say you have something in current use and you did a 30-day close, there's really just nothing we can do. I mean, we have 15 days from the time it is. There's a lot of people that are doing it. There's a lot involved in the current use, and sometimes we can help you along, and sometimes because of work we just can't. Someone asked, are the appraisers county employees? Yes, all our appraisers are county employees. They drive, at least my residential appraisers, they will always be in marked county cars, say assessor's office on the side of them. And they also will have other identification with them. So people are claiming to be the assessor's office, and we get calls a lot. Oh, I'm an appraiser with the county. You're not in a county car, you're not a county appraiser. The other thing to understand is that our appraisers, the assessor's office has the right to go on people's property. We have rights that the sheriff's office doesn't even have, because we're only going on there to determine what the detailed characteristics are. And there's a lot of times we get calls from people. It's like, how come you didn't call me first before you came out on my property? Well, number one, we don't have your telephone number. And number two, it's just, we have almost 80,000 parcels in Clark County. I have 14 appraisers, so you can kind of divide that number up and see that to try and call people and set appointments up, it just wouldn't work. And so our people do have the right to come out and go on the property and get what the characteristics are that's there.
So Peter, oftentimes in the real estate world, we're working with our clients, and they find that when they purchased a house and maybe the tax card, the building sketch is not accurate, or there's a different floor plan. What's the best way for that property owner to make those changes?
The best thing is if you have an appraisal drawing, right? Because appraisers go out and measure those characteristics and send it to us. Because really a lot of the plans that we draw into our system is based upon when it's at new construction, right? It's based upon the new construction plans. And as you can imagine, we have lots and lots of new construction. And so we have to move very quickly. And so we are just going out, making a few measurements, saying, is it pretty much the size? But a lot of times people change plans. And, there may be things that, well, we decided to shrink this room, or we added existing space here, or, sometimes there's just things that we don't know, because maybe there's some plans where they have a fourth bedroom or it's open, right? Open below, and there's a choice. Well, if it's into us and, hey, this is plan A, and we draw it in the system as, okay, that's their plan. It's a 4-bedroom, boom. That's what it goes in as. We can't go inside those homes and see exactly what's in there. And so there's times like, hey, I got an appraisal done and this part's not finished out. Yeah, send us the drawing. And we can take that information and update it in the system.
Looks like there's a couple more questions there. I don't know if you want time, if you have time to answer a couple more questions.
Sure. Let's see. How do you find out? I'm not sure if he's asking, how do we find out about unpermitted additions to houses or property? A lot of times we go out there and we can see that something's been added that's not there. And a lot of times it's outbuildings. We don't require permits for outbuildings as long as they're ag buildings, but we do require them if it has electricity and bath and a bathroom in it, and it's connected to sewer. And so if we do see people living in it, something that hasn't been permitted, that is a health safety issue. And they're typically pretty easy to see. It's like, this house looks like it was 10 years old. Wow, this thing is brand new. We don't have it on the tax roll. So those are the easiest ones to find.
How about converted garages? We see that quite a bit in our industry. So as an assessor, and they go out there, the appraisers, they go out and they see that maybe the door's missing or it looks like there's been a conversion. Do they just assume that it's now living space, or how is that assessed then?
Yeah, a lot of times we do assume that it's living space. As you know, Johnny, appraisal, you have to make certain assumptions, but typically if they have converted the garage and changed it out so it looks like a regular side of a house, they've taken the garage door out. Obviously, if the garage door is still there, we don't know really what they've done behind it or not, so we wouldn't do it. But usually, yeah, then we would add that into living space, and then there's typically a adjustment because now it doesn't have a garage. So then we dial it back for not having a garage.
Great.
Okay, someone wanted to know in a short sentence, what are the commercial trends in light of COVID? Apartments, retails, hospitality. Number one, we haven't really started analyzing that. We are actually sending out to all the commercial owners. We're going to be sending out a questionnaire to them, what's been happening in rents. But as you can imagine, rents have seemed to be continuing to go up and retail goes down, and it's probably a good time in residential assessment. We do what's called an annual adjustment every year. So we only look at property once every 6 years. The other 5, 6, the county, we go out and we do analysis. My main duty of appraisers are actually doing statistical analysis. So if we go, hey, most properties went up 5%, so then we apply that 5% adjustments to all the properties that are in that residential neighborhood. We don't do that in commercial because in commercial, for example, apartment buildings values are going through the roof, and shopping malls quite literally, and retail, some of their values are going down, right? So each different group of sector of commercial is different, and we actually have a different commercial appraiser for each of those sectors. So we have ones that just focus on what's happening in storage units, what's happening in multifamily, what's happening in gas stations and retail, what's happening in industrial. So our appraisers are in commercial are sectored out into each of the different sectors.
It looks like Cole had a question on further elaboration of the tax valuations. He says, take your 10 homes. How are those homes determined? So from a mass appraisal model, can you further talk about how large is that mass appraisal? Is it by subdivision or by track? Or
well, in that case, is the 10 homes, that would be the boundaries of the tax district. So we do a number of different things with mapping. Of course, we have to create neighborhoods, which is they're different than the county recognized neighborhoods, right? Our neighborhoods may be maybe 3 or 4 neighborhoods. So you may have like Salmon Creek, North Salmon Creek, South Salmon Creek, right? they may be all separate neighborhoods by the county, but we may put them into one neighborhood because they're a similar market unit. And so we do put homes into neighborhoods based upon the kind of the market and geographic area. But for your question, the 10 homes would be all the homes in the taxing district, and that's just decided based upon the boundaries of the city. So if you're in the city of Vancouver, it's every house, it's every property that's in the jurisdiction of the Vancouver city limits. One of the other things that does happen in my office is I do oversee the annexation process. So there's a parcel and wants to be annexed into the city of Vancouver. You have to go through the city of Vancouver, get those approvals, the landowner approvals, and then they send it to my office to actually map and do the taxing and the mapping of where the taxes are going to go for that annexation. So that is something that happens in my office. And so say in that 10 home taxing district, maybe one of the other homes says, hey, I want to annex into that taxing district, and they would go through let's say that little government there to get annexed in, and then they send it to our office. So there is no really number of base of homes that's typically utilized. It's just dependent on the size of taxing districts.
And it looks like one last comment in the chat box. Katie says easements, not sure if you mentioned them.
Yeah, and I did, like I said, I mentioned the easements. The big thing on the easements is making sure they're recorded. There's a number of times we run into people, they buy a house and they're like, well, I have an easement through my neighbor's yard. Hey, it's not recorded. If an easement is there and it's recorded, it will be recorded on the dominant parcel, servient parcel. And so it should appear on both parcels. So if you are recording the easement to make sure it's taken care of, make sure you're recording it onto both the parcels so everyone knows. That can just add a lot of legal headaches later. Oh, can you show us how to use the sewer lines? I can, but that may be something that's better done one-off because there's a number of steps to go through it and it's fairly confusing.
And I think we've even talked about maybe having a whole nother lunch and learn just about, going through the mapping functions of the website.
Yeah, we could do that on the mapping functions of the website. Yeah, because there's a lot of different layers that are available in that section, and I'm not really a good expert at it because there is so many different layers in there. What creeks are there, or what type of soils there are, wetland overlays. There's so many overlays. And one thing is I do have to say is our data is really dependent upon those districts actually updating us. Right now we're working with the city of Camas, like get us where your sewers are running, because they run quickly, they're putting them out there and then they don't let us know. All of a sudden, hey, there's a subdivision that's gone in, but we don't show that there's any sewers out there, but we know there has to be. And especially on prime development land is very dependent upon whether there's sewer there or not. So it is important for us to get that information. So we're trying to get everyone updated, but there's different places where you can go in and see the different things, because you're going to have basically for water runoff sewer lines, and then dirty sewer lines, and there's different types of things that are shown in there. Water lines, they can run separately, and sometimes there's different sewer districts. So
right,
that would be better to be held later or as a one-off with someone.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of functions there that we could really dive into, and so maybe we'll set up another lunch and learn in a few weeks from now. Maybe we'll come back and revisit that.
That's great.
Looks like that's all the questions. I think we've covered everything. And Peter, want to thank you again for taking time out of your busy day to educate us here for the past hour. And so any of those that are attendees that are still on, if you have messages, you want to email Peter directly, his email's on the screen.
Oh, I just took it off,
It was
but
on the screen.
yeah,
It was up there.
yeah. it was.
And also for future lunch and learns, if you have any advice of what you'd like to see or speakers or topics, go ahead and send us an email to CCAR or myself. And we'd love to make sure that we provide some educational topics for you. So just want to say thank you all those who attended today.